This episode is made possible by purchasing resources through the Creation Science for Kids store.
Welcome to the Creation Science
For Kids
show. What was the world like before Adam sinned? Was it possible to feel discomfort or even pain? We look at the first verse in the Bible talking about bad, or rather not good, in God's creation. We have a look at scientific ideas about our pain nerves and learn about the tallest known living creature, the giraffe. Praise the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart, in the company of the upright, in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of splendor and majesty is his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He has caused his wondrous works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Psalm 111, verses 1 through 4. This is episode 49 of the podcast where we learn about Jesus, our Creator, and his amazing world. Hi, I'm Sherry Fields, your host, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Timothy.
Hi.
And Charity.
Hi.
To follow along with what we're looking at, check out the show notes, creationscience4kids.com/lonely. Today, we're up to a new section in Genesis chapter 2, and I thought about including the whole little account, but we tend to get caught up in God creating and bringing the animals to Adam, and I really wanted to bring out some of the things he said in verse 18. So would you read that verse for us, please, Timothy?
And the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a help meet for him."
Very good. Yeah, a lot of people don't take much time thinking about this verse, but there are two important concepts here that show us not just about us, but also about God. So what is it that God said? Do you remember back in chapter 1, over and over again, at the end of the day, he would say, and God saw that it was
very good.
That's, the last day. He said that it was good. Over and over again, God talks about what he made was good. But here he is, and this is on day 6 still, and he says, it is
not good.
Right. What was not good yet about his creation? He hadn't finished. It wasn't bad as in something was messed up and twisted, but it was not yet the way it should be. What was it like for Adam right then when God had first made him?
It was lonely.
Yeah, he was all alone. Now, I was reading some commentaries to see what people thought about it, and Matthew Henry pointed out that, well, God could have created a whole bunch of people and the place wouldn't have been lonely. No, he could not have. That would have messed up the whole way that Jesus saved us. What was it about Jesus that allows him dying in our place and being clean and pure in the sacrifice to save you?
He was the second Adam.
Yeah, he is our blood relative. If God had created a whole bunch of people out of nothing the way he did Adam, they would have each been on their own, just like the angels. The angels fall or not, each on their own. They cannot rescue one another. But because God only made Adam out of the ground, and then every other human being that has ever existed, including Jesus, is his blood relative, that's how that works. So that idea doesn't work at all. So God had to create just one person, Adam, and he created him long enough to say, this isn't a good situation to leave Adam all by himself. We know at this point, what had God already done for Adam? In verse 8, the Lord God,
he planted a garden in Eden. And he put Adam in there.
And then, as well as being put in the garden, why did he put him there? Not just to have a beautiful vacation, but
to keep it.
Which means to
water it and basically take care of it.
What's the verb we have for taking care of a garden?
Gardener.
Yeah, to be the gardener. Okay, and he had also given him commands. He said,
you can eat from every tree.
Except
the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Right. So he had already done quite a bit for Adam. Gave him a home, a job, and something to make sure he did and did not do. And at that point, then he says, this isn't good for a man to be all by himself. How did God know that being all alone is not good? There are several religions. Judaism, which is the people who follow the Old Testament but refuse to accept that Jesus is God. They say that God is one. He is just a single person, that there was no relationship before creation because God is just one. Same with Islam. Muslims think that's a terrible heresy that we believe that there is more than one person in the Godhead. What do we call what we believe about God, what God reveals in his scriptures? Do you know?
A trinity?
Yes, that God is a trinity, that God has always and will always exist in how many persons?
3.
3. And what do we call them?
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
And the Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit. Yes, they have always existed. We saw that already when they were getting ready to create man. In the first place, they said, let us. And in Hebrew, that has to mean at least 3 persons. Even the word for God, Elohim, means more than 2. That God is more than 2. We know it's exactly 3. So God has always been in fellowship. He's had friends. He's had someone to love from eternity past. And so when he saw Adam all alone, he knew that this is not a good situation. You need somebody of the same kind as you to talk to be friends with. This also tells us something about what it was like before the fall. We've already talked about how there's no problem with us having to use a bathroom before the fall, that there's nothing sinful about having stuff come out of our body that needs to be dealt with, that God would have created it that way, just like today, to help out the plants. So here's something else that we know. Just because there was no sin doesn't mean it was perfect in the way we sometimes think of it, that there could be a lack of something good before sin. God fixes it, but he let the lack be there. Why do you think? Why do you think God let that lack be there before the fall?
Well, that he did give Adam a person to be with.
Yeah, if God had created Eve at the exact same moment, or as soon as he breathed life into him, with the very next breath, he puts him to sleep and creates Eve, what would have happened to Adam?
He'd been like, well, if she's here, then if she's so important, am I important to her? And she's just as important as me?
Possibly. But would it have been easy for him to say, oh, I am so glad, and gratitude, to be grateful? Before Christmas, we go for quite a while usually without getting many nice things because our parents and loved ones are saving up stuff for us. So then on Christmas, we get a whole bunch of nice things, right?
Yeah.
So that's what makes Christmas presents so special. We get nice things all through the year, but when they come here, there, and everywhere, and you don't have to wait for them, it's harder to be excited. God made Adam wait for his wife to find someone who would be a good friend for him, a good fit for him. Okay, so that brings us to the next point. Have you ever heard of a helpmeet?
Yes.
Okay, what is it? What do we use that for?
Your wife?
A wife. We often call a wife a helpmeet. Now, that's actually taking the old-fashioned terms that we get in the King James. Meet just means it works, it meets the needs, it fits. So, in fact, I looked up some of the more modern translations to see how they said it. Here is what the Common English Bible says, I will make him a helper that is perfect for him. And the Easy to Read Bible says, I will make him the companion he needs, one just right for him. How's that make you feel about being a woman?
I am a guy who's a lot like me, and I'm perfect for him.
Okay, so we are very much like men, but why did God create us? What makes us special? What's our place?
As a wife.
And even when we're not a wife, you're a daughter, and there are always men around.
With a tiara.
What, for men to have a tiara?
Yeah, with a
decoration?
Yeah.
No, there's not really anything about decoration. And in fact, when I looked this up, That whole perfect for or just right or meet, as the King James puts it, isn't there in the Hebrew at all. It just says, I will make a helper for him. So that's what he created us for, that God knew that Adam couldn't do it all alone, that he couldn't live his life, do his work and everything all by himself. He needed somebody who...
Get bored. You get bored.
Yeah. Now, something as you get, one of the fun things to study about how people work is a difference in how men and women think, that women are much better at multitasking. God designed us to do a good job running a house. When you've got little kids that you always have to be aware of, make sure they don't fall into the fire or put their hands in the toilet and all kinds of stuff while we're cooking supper, while we're taking care of the clothes, while we're doing this, that, and the other. We can have a whole bunch of things going at the same time and kind of keep those plates spinning. Have you ever seen a juggler that has all these poles and they've got plates on them that they keep spinning? Okay, so that's the way God designed us. We can do all those things at once. Men are really good at doing one thing incredibly well. Men are usually the best at whatever they are, whether it's piano. The conductors are almost always men. The best cooks in the world are usually men, Timothy. Because even though you're having to think, okay, I've got to get the chicken going and I've got to do the noodles and all this, if you focus on just that thing, you can do it incredibly well. But he knew that men would need somebody to help him run his home and to see to things differently so that certain things wouldn't go missing. I did find one commentary that was all about work in the Bible. I thought that was a fascinating perspective on the scriptures. But they point out that if you were actually doing a modern English translation, especially here in America, for this word helpmeet, you would probably say co-worker. A co-worker is someone who is there at the same job with you, doing similar things where you're working on the same project and you each have your different assigned tasks, but is one person better than the other?
No.
No. Each has their own role, but there's nothing that says that woman is less important, that man is just superior to woman. No. He just needed someone to help get the work done, to see things differently. That there would be things that even Adam would probably have gotten driven crazy by certain tasks that Eve would have really enjoyed. Like in many families, one of the spouses will do the laundry and the other can't stand doing the laundry. That kind of difference is very common in people, and we usually end up marrying somebody who enjoys doing what we don't.
Like the 6'10" guy and the 4 wife.
Right. Well, yeah. And even there, like, men are generally bony. I know my brother, he was so skinny when our sister was born. She did not like snuggling with him as a baby unless he had a pillow up against his chest. That never happens to a grandma. Babies just love snuggling with grandmas. So God knew that was all going to be needed. And so he was going to make someone who could help Adam, who could be his friend so he wouldn't be lonely, and who could help him not miss some of the things that otherwise he would have from the way he looked at the world. And now, Timothy, is it bad to be a man and look at the world?
No.
No. He wants you to be that way. He just wants women around to help see another way. Now, I was trying to think of something to put in the middle, and my newsletter from the Creation Research Society came in, and there was a perfect article by one of my favorite lady creation scientists. Her name is Jean K. Leitner, and she likes to study, things like mutations, so stuff down inside the cells. But this article is on pain receptors prior to the curse, and what she thinks God could have been up to when he created the nerves that now give us pain. I'm not going to read it. I could understand it all, but she uses a lot of big words like gustatory and affective motivational. So I'm just going to give you the highlights of what she had to say. So she starts out by pointing out we have all kinds of sensory receptors. These are nerves that send messages up to our brain that tell us what's going on in and around our body. We have ones that help us to detect chemicals Like if we detect a chemical in the air, what do we call that?
Smell.
Smell, yeah. What our noses do. They send messages from these receptors to tell us what is in the air around us. So we can smell when there's yummy food or flowers or smoke. Okay, and then there's also taste in our food. Those are all sent by receptors. We have ones down inside of us that tell us what our oxygen level is. Like when you have a cold or you've been running a lot, it tells you slow down now. You've got to catch your breath or your brain is going to faint before you've fainted. There's even some that help monitor blood pressure to make sure that your blood pressure doesn't fall too low or get too high. And then we have receptors that help us know where our body is at and keep our balance. Even in the dark, that's something to get into a very dark space and then see if you can feel how you're upright or see if you can touch your nose with your eyes shut. That you do with your receptors. Then we have the ones that tell us pain. Now, even today, we know that the same experiences between different people, like I once watched a Mythbusters where to test pain without hurting people, they had their
ice bowl.
A bowl of ice water. That's one way that scientists test where you can experience pain without having your body damaged because you won't quite get frostbite. So anyway, we know between different people, their experience of a painful situation like that can be very different. And even for you, for one person, whether you're tired, whether you're happy, all different things can change how painful an experience is. So we already know that that still is happening today. And do you know what happens to people if they can't experience pain at all? Would that be a good thing?
No.
No. What would happen to you?
You wouldn't be able to tell if, like, rats came into your room and ate.
Yeah. And what makes you think of that? When do you...
Leprosy.
Leprosy. Leprosy takes away the ability. It kills those pain nerves on your outside. And yes, it's very dangerous, especially if you're living in somewhere hot where you've got rodents like that. Yeah. And if they play the guitar, anything they do, we would stop because we would realize, ow, that hurts. I'm hurting myself. And they don't realize it, and it can really mess up your life. There's even one kind of disorder you can be born with where your pain receptors don't work. And it's terrifying for the parents because the children don't understand what's going on and they can hurt themselves very badly. So God had to give us pain receptors because otherwise we were not going to survive in a fallen world. But even before the fall, Adam needed to know when something he was doing, like what if he had invented the first hoe to, or something to dig up the soil to make it soft for planting seeds. What happens to us if we keep digging or shoveling or using something with a long handle?
You get pain in your hand.
Blisters.
Blisters. Yeah, that's because the body has to have some way of preventing damage to be done. So Adam would have needed to know, hey, my hand is saying, you better take a break from doing that or change your position because otherwise you're going to damage yourself. He would have needed some way to do that. The thing is that we know already, like I said, not everyone experiences pain in the same way under the same circumstances. So it's possible that before the flood, or before the fall, Adam would have felt sensations from his hand saying, change position, find something else to do for a while without it being so painful, without it hurting. Whether he would have listened, I don't know, because I know they tried an electric shock.
Yeah, like that. Okay.
I don't know. I know they tried that with leprosy patients where they would have like a light go off and they would almost always just ignore it, even though they knew with their head that when this light goes off, you must stop or you will hurt yourself. Whether Adam was smarter than that, I don't know. Here's what Dr. Leitner said. Simply the ability to sense a need to remove himself from something potentially damaging would have been sufficient in a very good creation. So then she goes on and talks about then you had the fall. You had not only the brokenness in relationships, that is a pain if you've ever experienced what it's like when you love someone and they loved you back and then something went bad or they die. You'd rather, I don't know, have a hammer fall on your toe. Far rather have something like that, a physical pain, than that kind of emotional pain. So that happened with the fall. And then also God created the thorns and thistles. That would have made the world a lot more likely to cause pain. And then there's even with Eve, when she gets told you will have pain in childbirth. There's no reason why being pregnant and giving birth has to cause pain, but God changed it so it does. Here's what she concludes. The absence of the unpleasant sensation we call pain before the curse was likely due to multiple factors, including the lack of exposure to painful stimuli. There wasn't much to cause pain back then. And differences in how the signals were processed. So that's our best guess. It seems pretty reasonable to me. Have you ever thought about whether there was pain before the fall?
No.
No? I've wondered, was there a rock big enough, a cliff of any kind before the fall that you could have fallen off of? And a lot of people that are more skeptical, they'll say, would it have been possible for the elephant to squish the ant?
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that God doesn't really tell us. We do know that a number of things that now are needed, like venom in snakes, could have served a useful purpose, or even mosquitoes with their blood-sucking straws. They could have been just fruit-sucking straws beforehand. That a lot of things were already in place and useful. As she points out, we had to have a way of knowing, hey, you need to change your position because you're going to cause yourself damage. That he didn't make Adam out of rubber and then turn him into a flesh and blood person when the fall came.
Yeah.
So these are really interesting things to think about that scientists are busy examining. Well, we believe the Bible. We got to think through what would this have been like scientifically. So I thought what she had to say was very interesting, and I really appreciate the Creation Research Society and all they do. And by the way, if you've got a teenager or somebody going into college, they have scholarships for free memberships to their society, and they can get this and access to their online journals as well. If you go to my teens page, you can find that. Okay, now it's time to hear from you. What do you have for us today, Timothy?
I have giraffes. Giraffes are the tallest animals in the world that we know of. They can grow up to 16 to 20 feet. That's over 6 meters. They live on the continent of Africa in the warm grasslands called the savanna. The savanna has trees and bushes, but they're spread way apart.
Okay, why don't they live in the jungle? Yeah, if you're going through a thick woods and there's not a trail, is it easy for you?
No.
No. Can you imagine being 20 feet tall and big? Yeah, they'd get stuck. So they just turn around and go out. Why do they still like places where there are trees?
They eat lots of leaves.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what their favorite tree is?
The acacia tree.
Uh-huh. Now, you talked about how tall they are. How heavy can they get?
They can get up to 2,800 pounds, which is about 1,300 kilograms.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy. But does that mean they're slow like a sloth?
No, they can run up to 35 miles per hour.
Uh-huh. Which is about
56 kilometers in 1 hour.
Kilometers per hour is just like miles per hour. Okay, so they can run for a little bit, and then what if they want to travel somewhere else? How fast can they walk?
10 miles per hour.
Yeah, about 16 kilometers an hour. Yeah, that's pretty fast.
Yeah.
Now, what is it that God gave them that lets them walk so fast, even though they're
long legs.
Long legs? About how long?
6 feet.
Yeah, almost 2 meters long. Yeah. Why is it good that they're so tall when what their favorite food is tree leaves?
Because if they were super small, they couldn't reach the leaves.
Right. Because when you see pictures or videos of the giraffes, who's living near them?
Lions.
Yeah, but lions aren't eating acacia leaves. What other animals are around them that do?
Monkeys.
Not so many monkeys there. There's not enough. They prefer the jungle. Zebras. And gazelles. What do they like to eat?
They like to eat grass.
And leaves. So if the giraffes were shorter, they would be eating the same leaves, and the trees would have no leaves at the bottom, and they would have lots of leaves at the top, and nobody would be eating them. Plus, have you seen those African trees? They have very few branches down low, and they have lots of branches with leaves up at the top. Just right for the giraffes to get. Okay, what else did you learn about them? What did we find when we wanted to know about their horns?
Their skull is part of their horns.
Right. When a sheep or a deer, like deer have antlers, so theirs actually break off every year and they regrow them. A sheep and a goat, they're much more like their fingernails. Giraffes, those horns are actually part of their
skull.
Right. So even when they've died, and you can see it's all one piece, then it's covered with the hair and has that tuft at the top. Then what else did we see? Looking at the skull, what did we notice about their jaws?
They've got jaws in the back.
Teeth at the back.
And
what's this? A big...
like pincher thing.
Where?
At the front of their mouth.
Right. And in between the grinding teeth at the back and the biting teeth at the front, they've
got a little space.
Well, that's not a little space. It's a pretty big space. And what did that make us think that they needed that big hole for?
Their tongue.
Their tongue. And what did we find out? What's their tongue like? What color is it? You've seen them at the zoo.
Blue.
It's a blue tongue. And how long is it?
21 inches.
Yeah, which is...
They're 53 centimeters.
Right. So they can stick it way out to grab those leaves without where their heads can't reach. Yeah. So they've got a really cool head. What did we find out about the babies?
They stay in their mother's tummy between 14 months and 16 months.
Right. And when they're born, does their mommy lay down?
No.
And then the mom's standing up, so when the baby's born...
it drops 5 feet.
All that length of their legs, yeah. But the baby's okay. And then how long does it take for them to learn to walk?
About 10 hours.
10 hours. And then they can get up and get away from danger. But even with that, what did we find out, which is kind of sad? There aren't many animals that bother the grown-ups, but the baby ones, what likes to eat them?
Lions, hyenas, and leopards.
That eat about 3/4 of the babies. So for every 4 babies born, 3 of them get eaten. That's very sad. Okay. Now with them eating leaves, what do they do most of the time? Are they running around and having fun?
No.
They have to
eat about 16 to 20 hours a day.
That means they have between 8 and 4 hours off a day. That's even to sleep. That's not much sleep, is it? Yeah. So they're spending all day munching on leaves. Look at this. How long do they live?
They live about 25 years.
Yeah. So that's fairly long. Not nearly as long as elephants for such a big one. Oh, yeah. We watched a video about the daddies. What will the daddies do when they both want the same lady?
They'll swing their heads at each other and wonk their neck.
Yeah. Thinking about it, it's kind of silly. It's not at all like 2 rams racing up to each other and clunking skulls or the elk with their antlers. So they take advantage of their long necks and they just go thwack, thwack sideways.
It looked like they were attacking each other with arms and giving themselves high fives with their heads at the wrong places.
Yeah, it did look kind of silly, but at least they don't get seriously hurt. Just one of them decides they don't want to get slapped around or pushed anymore, and or maybe they have a headache from swinging their own neck around, and so whoever doesn't give up gets the lady. All right, now we had you, because I knew we had this at home, watch something special about giraffes. What did you watch?
I watched The Incredible Creatures That Defy Evolution.
Put out by Dr. Job Martin, and he's the one who talks while we get to see cool videos. And what did you learn about them? Okay, first of all, what does evolution teach you have to have in order for new animals to come into being?
Old ones.
Old ones
ones.
That were different, and then they change a little bit, and then their grandchildren change, or I'm speeding it up still. And their great-great-great-grandchildren change a little bit. And then every time it changes a little bit until you have something new. And what did he talk about that wouldn't work? Because every time he said, and if that happened, they would die.
If they didn't have this thing in their neck
Mhm.
to help them get water, their brains would blow out of their heads.
Okay, so what's going on? They don't get water with the thing in there. It's, I forget the name because I didn't watch it with you. The spongy stuff at the base of their skull. But yeah, how do they get water to drink besides the leaves? That's not quite enough. So every few days they have to go to the water hole. And how do they get the water?
They spread their legs apart and bend their head upside down.
Way down, 6 feet lower than their heart. Yeah, or more than that. Okay, so if we had a big, long neck like that, all the blood in our neck,
it would just come up into our head and blow our brains out.
Right. So what did God give the giraffe so that wouldn't happen?
He gave them this sponge at the base of their skull.
That does what?
That collects all the blood.
Right. So they get their drink.
Then they stand up.
And what would happen if we had been hanging our heads tipped upside down for the whole time we're drinking and then stood up? What happens to us if we stand up suddenly? Have you ever had that happen? I've had it happen, especially when I'm pregnant, where my blood pressure is too low and I almost faint because I don't have enough oxygen getting to my brain. So that would happen to them with how far down their head is and then how far up it goes, that all the blood would just rush out and they wouldn't have any oxygen left and they would fall over and faint and then the lions would eat them. So what did God do so that they don't faint?
He gave them these things that can close up and not let any blood down.
Do you remember what those are called?
Valves.
Valves, They're one-way doors that slowly let the blood go down, but not too quickly. What else did he talk about?
If they couldn't run that fast, they would get caught by a lion.
Right. So what did he give them that lets them run so fast?
Long legs.
Okay. Now, what else did God give the giraffe that allows them?
Heavy heart.
Yeah, how heavy?
20 pounds.
25. So over 10, like 11, 12 kilo. Yeah, he gave them a big heart so that it would have enough
power.
Right. Yeah. Because for most animals, your heart is fairly high and it doesn't have to go up very much. Like on a person, it goes up about 18 inches. And you want it to work more or less like a water tower. A water tower is built so that way the water's already high up and it wants to flow down and it's easy to get into people's houses. The giraffe heart is way down below the head when it's up eating leaves. So you had to make it big and strong. Yeah. So what does God think about giraffes?
They're special. He made them just right so that they could live properly and not die.
Now, it was nice to learn that there are plenty of giraffes left. They are not at all endangered, even with the wild animals eating their babies. So that's kind of nice that there'll be giraffes around for us to see, Lord willing, for years to come.
Forget, you can find links to all the things we've talked about today by visiting the show notes page, creationscience.com/lonely or /049 for episode 49.
While you're there, I'd like to ask for your help. If you know someone who might enjoy listening to this podcast and checking out my website, would you let them know for us? Every article I do, including today's show notes, has share buttons to make it super easy for you to pass on to your friends on Facebook or by email. You have amazing power to help your friends find out the truth with just a click of a button.
Plus, if you want to encourage us, leaving the show a rating on iTunes is a great way to do that and help families looking for new podcasts to find us. Thanks!
Has your family signed up for my weekly email newsletter? Once a week, I share interesting creation resources I've run into, as well as the link to that week's article, which means you won't have to bother remembering how to find the show notes again. I've recently put together a creation quiz you can take, and you'll also get access to my amazing collection of kids' creation resources that I've discovered over the past years. Whether you want to play a game, find a science curriculum, plan a vacation, or watch fun videos, you'll find the links in a flash on my page. You can sign up in a couple seconds from the show notes, but to see why I care so much about making creation science fun for kids, visit creationscience4kids.com/kidsresources.
Do you like science? Got a subject you want to learn about? Or maybe you like telling stories.
Remember, it's super easy to turn your smartphone into a recorder, and if you send me a report, story, joke, or interesting idea, I might use it in a future show. Head over to creationscience4kids.com/podcast to find out what to do.
Well, this finishes up our show for today. Until next time, have fun treasuring our amazing universe and creator.
Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. Revelation 4:11.